much, and like I said, I used to teach biological sciences and environmental sciences. That's how I started out at Covina High School. And I was a wacko environmentalist believing in Jerry Brown and everything about Jerry Brown in 1972, 73 and all that stuff. And I actually used to teach his stuff for about 3 years. And we were sitting around in our department meeting one day and we said, what is all this stuff that's coming down from this guy? This is in 1976, 78. And we figured it out, it was just pure communism. So we tossed everything from Greenpeace, all the stuff that we had going on, because we just figured it out. And never did we ever realize that Jerry Brown would rear his ugly head in 2010, right? And look what a monstrosity we have now. Everything, I was on my radio. Those of you that don't know, I do a radio show called Agenda 21 Radio. And let's see, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Red State Talk Radio. It's all digital. And we talk about Agenda 21 and all the elements about Agenda 21. And so it's all back to Jerry Brown. I cannot get away from Jerry Brown. Just like completely, I'm all over him now, because I think I know about Jerry Brown. So we don't pull any punches about what Jerry Brown is up to. I'm getting creeped up on. Oh, how many of you know about United Nations Agenda 21? See, back in the day when I first started the radio show back in 2011, I was doing another radio show called the Inside Education Show, because I was an educator for 41 years. Custodian to superintendent, that whole routine. Opened up 2 charter schools that were oddly enough closed by Jerry Brown. It's because they were manual arts schools. You know, manual arts for our kids, right?
Yeah.
Helping the communities out and all that stuff. But I knew that in the education system, I could really see that there was something really, truly going on in the 41 years that I was in there. And really around 1985, 86, 87, we started to see the curriculums change quite a bit, and we started getting away from the manual arts programs and more into the social justice stuff. And then our budget started to get sliced. All of that because of Prop 13, right? So, well, anyway, what was happening is that giant sucking sound was starting. And what that giant sucking sound was, cash going directly to the state capital, not going to the treasuries of the counties any longer. It was all being diverted to the state capitals. And of course, when it goes to the state capital, you have centralized control of California's money, right? So there was less and less money that was coming back down to our schools by the 90s. And as a result, we had to cut programs. And what were the most expensive programs? Shop classes. Shop classes, art classes, music classes, all those classes had to go. And so when we started losing those classes in the mid-90s, all of a sudden we started seeing our dropout rate go crazy. In fact, I started getting involved in the dropout rate by the mid-90s and saying to myself, there's something like really wrong with this dropout rate. It's like really high in California when you start to calculate it. And I was in school administration at this time, and I could really see the big changes coming. So I said, you know, I think there's like a plan behind all this. It's just kind of my way of thinking. I was suspicious. I've always been a tinfoil hat person. And in fact, I left education for a couple of years in the early 90s, and I got involved with radio production and TV production and stuff like that because of one of my dreams that I wanted to do. And I stumbled into the Orange County bankruptcy. How many remember that? You guys, I can point you out, you remember this. How many have heard of Cloward and Piven? See, you know, same guys know about Cloward and Piven. Francis Hawks Piven and Richard Cloward were 2 psychologists from Columbia University, social psychologists, and what they understood and what they came up with was the concept of overloading the government, okay? Now what do I mean by that? Overloading the resources of the government so you can force their hand to do what you desire to do. And one of the first places they did that was back in New York. Back in the early 80s, they almost bankrupted New York with a plan to have people just flood the welfare system. And they did. They started bringing in drugs and things like that, and the welfare system quickly got overloaded. And guess what? They almost went bankrupt.
Well, they did go bankrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt. And they came to the federal government for a bailout.
That's right.
And was Reagan president then? Whoever it was, I can't remember, said, no, we're not gonna
Yeah,
do
it was
that.
Ray.
I think it was Reagan.
Early 80s.
Yep, and so, but they did though, bring New York in and say, okay, we'll lend you money if you come back with a solid system of governance that will allow a surplus and not just throwing money away, as the legislature has done. Under those circumstances, we will approve your budget. If we approve your budget and you stick to it and show us how you're gonna pay us back, we'll lend you the money. And that's what happened, and that's why New York is even alive today.
They restructured it, in
Yeah.
other words. It's still, New York is a disaster though,
It
in the
is.
sense that
Well, we got-
Manhattan controls the whole state, right?
Right.
There are
And
more
it-
voters, and this is interesting.
Go ahead,
Manhattan and the environs are 371 square miles. The whole rest of the state is 30,000 square miles. And they, in those 371 square miles, can outvote the entire balance of the state. And that is why I also have these figures about how that affects the country, which is amazing. We won't do it today. That is the reason why we want to absolutely keep, no matter what, the electoral college.
Absolutely.
Without it, we're doomed.
That's
But
right.
there is hope. And the hope is that we, and I say mostly Paul, actually entirely Paul, have been contacted by these states who are watching what we are doing very, very carefully. New York wants to separate Manhattan from the balance of the state. Illinois wants to separate Chicago from the balance of the state. Nevada wants to separate Las Vegas from the balance of the
Love
state.
it.
And in fact, on the 21st of this month, in a few days, they are going to read the same Declaration of Independence, or their slightly different version of it, that Paul read on the 15th of January 1 year ago, almost to the day. And they are going to do what we are doing, and we're hoping to give them help on how to separate Nevada. Now you stop for a minute and think what this means to the balance of the country. Supposing California gets split, we will have $18 million We'll have 18 million people in New California, and Old California, we'll call it, will have about 22 million. So the 58 electoral votes we have now, or 58 or 53, will split accordingly. All of a sudden, what's going to happen? The electoral votes from Old California will drop down to about 27, and the electoral votes for New California will be about 23, and that means it would be almost impossible for the Democratic Party to win a nationwide election. That is why we are seeing the big fusses. They know, they got it. They understand this perfectly, and that's why several of us, mostly Paul, are going to be under some severe threats. They know that that's the end of the Democratic Party in the United States.
Thank you,
When that
Jesus.
happens, they're going to, before that happens, they're going to do everything they conceivably can to not allow it to happen. And if the fact that it does happen, you see what's going on now, the big push for popular vote in the country. The reason is New California. Patty says I have to sit down. Go stand
Anyway, getting back to Cloward and Piven's strategy, This is being seen very obviously with the caravans, right? How the overloading is starting to happen, and of course every caravan is coming up from Guatemala. It's actually, they all originated in Venezuela, and they bring them up. A lot of these people are what we call OTMs, or other than Mexican or other than Venezuelans, okay? That's a term that was done, that was concocted, if you will, back in 2008 and 2009 by the Texas Rangers, working with a group called the American Land Forces Institute that was training the Texas Rangers on how to identify terrorists coming into this country. Most of the men that are coming across in these caravans, which are designed to overload the system, right? They're of military age. A lot of them have been trained for military purposes.
Wow.
No one wants to talk about that. On my show, we talk about it all the time. We have been 100% accurate since 2010 about what has been going on. 100%. 100%. So when it comes out of our mouth, it's gone through a lot of filters and a lot of resources, assets in Central and South America and Mexico. And we've been absolutely spot on about what's going on currently at the border. 100%. And I can tell you what's going to happen in 2 to 3 to 4 weeks to 6 months. And certainly with these caravans, like the first caravan that you heard about, the Pueblo Sin Frontera thing back in March and April, they were saying, oh, it's only 250 people. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And quickly, the next day it's 500 people. And then the next day it's only 1,500 people. Well, we had already pegged a number that they had waiting already to come up at 15,000. And so the first time the film crews went out there from Fox, you're seeing 10,000 people on a road. We know what these numbers are going to be. The big numbers will happen as the fuses. We're calling these groups that are coming up right now the fuses. They're just the fuse that's going to ignite the dynamite. And the dynamite is Mexico. Because the plan is to come up, destroy the economy of Mexico, which they can do very easily. They just need to shut the power down in Mexico City for about 2 days. Watch what happens. And right now what's happening in Mexico? The cartels are stealing the gasoline out of the pipes, out of these huge pipes. So Mexico is starting to waffle a little bit. And when that happens, we're going to have 20 million people at the border. What do you think about Cloward and Piven's strategy?
Did you tell them who was their big student at Columbia University for Cloward and Piven?
Well, it was, Hillary Clinton was one of them.
Barack Hussein
Barack Obama, of course, and Bill Clinton. Bill and Hillary, they all did the same thing. They all took the same training for the most part.
Well, yes.
And you had the Harvard University connection with, I can't remember the name of that instructor's name right now, who came up with, what is it? See, I don't think I can't remember this. The something educational system, but I'll remember in a second. Just give it, it's a radio thing, it all comes back, we'll come back to it. But anyway, these people have all been hanging around a lot of bad characters, but this has all been by design, by plan, for the last 50, 60 years. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They think that all of a sudden this is just happening. No, there's been a systematic worldwide plan. And part of that plan came together in 1992 of June in the form of what was known as the Agenda 21 plan out of Rio de Janeiro. That was signed into what was called soft law by an agreement by George Bush, the president at the time. And then a year later, or actually a year before that, he was actually making the speeches about the one world order. That there would be a one world order guided by new laws promulgated from the United Nations. And then when he made that speech, it was September 11th, 1991. That's called a clue, right? These things just don't happen in a vacuum, these dates, right? People choose them symbolically. Like we chose the Declaration of Independence reading and the date for January 15, 2018, because it's the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. And therein we started the battle. And we put the One World Order people on notice 1 year ago, last Tuesday. 1 year ago, we told them it's a new world now. How many got what I just said there? Some of you know. We put the world on notice that we're here, we're serious, and we're going to stop this totalitarian mindset, this
Yes.
march, what they're trying to do by dissolving and destroying our sovereignty, destroying our borders. We're going to create new borders. Darn, I hate it when that happens. And we're going to create new borders using the Constitution of the United States. Because it's actually a playbook. You know, I used to coach football and play football. So to me, it's a playbook. That's really what it is. It's a set of instructions on how we should be governing ourselves. But people do not understand the playbook. Now, I know many of you do because I recognize the age groups in here. I know what kind of constitutional teaching you were taught. And you have quite a level of understanding about the Constitution. But there's a lot of the generation in here now, and most of the generation in our world, that just has no idea what the Constitution is or how powerful it is. We do get it. We do understand in New California. It is, next to the Bible, the most powerful documents on the planet man's ever come up with. But you have to get in the mindset, they're God documents. Because these documents were written by godly people, Christian people, Protestant people, Protestants, Lutherans. There were 56 signers to the Declaration of Independence. The first time the word independence was used on a worldwide scale. Did you know that? Everybody takes it for granted, independence. The word was invented in 1661. The world had no idea about that because everybody was dependent. And to think of the concept that one could be independent was something that was really odd, really strange. But the founding fathers knew what that word was and knew the symbolism, and they knew that the United States of America, the only way it could function is to get away from the tyranny and the tyrants of Europe and form their own country in the vision of God. And so they understood clearly that every man has God-given rights.
Amen.
And so they said to them, if we're going to write a document that's going to structure this country, we've got to ensure that everybody has their own God-given rights. God gives you the rights to be here in this room. And all they did was enumerate it in the document. So when it came to declaring their independence, they all got together and they said, okay, how are we going to do this? And so they decided that fundamentally they're going to write a document and they're going to explain the situation as they see it, as men who want to be free, as Christian men, as Protestants. And so what they did is they came up with another notion of putting in grievances with the Declaration of Independence, which is an explanation as to how they want to become free, but then the grievances lay down the excuses. This is what you're doing to us. And this is why to the world we're doing this. That had never been done in human history. It had never been done in human history. 1776. And people, I'm telling you, the world was shaking and trembling after they got done. It still is today. And right now, there's a lot of people shaking and trembling because we're in this room right here doing what we're doing. And they're not liking it. But if we do not do this, freedom and liberty in this country will be gone for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. Period. End of subject. Now, I just gave you guys the keys to the kingdom. Don't want to lay a guilt trip, but it was a couple of people when I first started this little route. They taught me about Agenda 21, and it was an easy learn for me because I could see what was going on. And they said, Paul, once we teach you about Agenda 21, you got to go out and teach other people because this is the preeminent moment in our nation's history and our world's history. Because if we don't use our freedoms that we have now and protect them and expand them, then we will lose this liberty that we have in this nation we have in just one generation. And look how close we are right now. And they're using the instruments of Agenda 21 right now, right in front of our faces, and everybody's kind of going, I accept it, right? Okay. This patch right here, I'll tell you about this a little bit. This is, we kind of created these. We're Zhilizhong. We're yellow vesters. Proud to be yellow vesters. In this little patch here, some of our people came up with, and it says, New California First Responders 51. I'll let you guys can pass around and check it out. You can't take the things off, though. I wore that vest on the day that I went up to Paradise, which was the first day I was up there. I was watching the fire from the road on Highway 99. Drove into Chico and made my way to the firemen and stuff, and I had press credentials and stuff. And they wanted to know if I wanted to go up and view the fire. I said no. I turned that one down, but the next day I did go up. How many have been up there and seen it?
Just yesterday.
Yeah. I don't care what anybody says. You can laugh at me all you want. That was not a natural disaster.
Nope, no, it's not.
Not even remotely. I used to live in Plumas County. I've been through numerous fires, including the Concal fire. When I was a principal up in Oroville, one of the Forest Service people comes walking in, hey, Mr. Preston, how you doing? Can you bring in these two people? Well, a big Concal fire was set in back 2001. My students were the ones who did it. They were the arsonists. Every day I was driving through that fire to come to work and everything. It was really amazing. I'll never forget that. But, you know, I've been in numerous forest fires and things like that. And I went to Santa Rosa. I was at Santa Rosa the week before the big fire up there. And then I gave a speech, and I came back 2 weeks after the fire to speak again at Orlean Corley's house, who's the Eagle Forum person. And it was interesting because I got to see the whole thing and the fire, the disasters, and all that stuff. And that was not a normal fire. There was no possible way, the way the buildings were burned. And so anyway, this fire up here, I'm telling you, there are places, it looks like a nuclear bomb went off. It absolutely does. It is the most bizarre thing to stand there in the white ash and to walk the lots and walk the properties. Tonight on the way in here, Susan Nightingale, who's a very close friend of ours. Susan Nightingale was one of the big sponsors, is still a big sponsor in New California for Butte County. It was at her house up on Janine Way that we always had meetings. And we started our meetings off with 3 people. Then it got to be 4, then it got to be 5. We finally had to get out of her house and go to the church where we had 70 people at the church in about a 2.5 month period. And then the next month it burned down because of the fire. I'm just telling you, they're using the tools of their trade right now on us. This weather that we have, this is not normal weather. And I'll tell you right now, you know, you hear about the things about chemtrails and you can laugh at us and all that stuff and say there's no science, but that's not true. It's absolutely not true. Some of the fire that was burning up there and around the plants, around the trees and so on, and around the houses was burning. It's been estimated by people that are specialists in thermodynamics who we took up to investigate. I've been up there 12 times on investigations. That the burning was going between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees. 3,000 and 4,000 degrees.
What temperature does a tree usually burn at?
1,700. Cremation's at 1,900. And you don't get the bones in cremation. Most of the people that they've been pulling out up there, you can't find their bones. They're dust.
Wow.
In a cremation, they have to grind the bones up because it doesn't burn the bones. Probably didn't want to know that. But that's the point. And there are a lot of people still up there. We're still getting reports. They're not talking about it. I get it. I have friends in places that tell me about this, that there's more and more people being pulled out. Estimates range anywhere from 500 to 3,000.
So why Paradise?
Why Paradise? It's a very good question. The biggest question is the population, strong conservative population. A lot of retired people, a lot of an area by which it could burn very clearly, very easily. Easy burn.
Hard to get in and out of too.
Hard to get in and out of. And of course, the other part about Agenda 21, how sweet is this? That on the Skyway, just when you get into the middle of town, they got a $1.5 million grant from one of our grant suppliers out there. Hey, put in one of these traffic calming things. So you'll go from 4 lanes coming out of town into 2. Right? One up, one down, that's it. And we're gonna take 2 lanes and make bike lanes out of them and put in curbing and so on, so you can't drive over there if in fact you had to escape the fire. So it became a choke point during the fire. And people were burned alive in their cars. This was a very well thought out, calculated plan.
Wow.
And this is only part of the plan. The fire burning plan has been in operation with Jerry Brown for at least 8 years, and actually before that. You know, we're just now hearing, I heard the commercial literally coming in here from CAL FIRE, that they've got this money now, they're gonna go into clearing the brush.
Finding the evidence, you mean?
This is really, isn't that interesting? Because they have not done it in years, 30 years of duff and debris that still sits in the ground out there. Now let's do this to show you how systemic this is. You know, you see these planes flying around with chemtrails, right? Well, those are not contrails.
Right.
They're chemicals being spewed out the back. Look up James Chang, Hughes Aircraft, 1990. He's the guy who's got all the patents, and they're very easily read and seen. Look at the address that you see him on. Google it, then look to the street just to the left of that. It's called Grosite Drive. It's my in-laws' house. For 23 years, I drove by his house in Santa Ana, California. And he's the guy who created all these chemicals that they're spraying on us. He's the guy who has the patents. Now that's a fact. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if you're Jerry Brown and you're telling me all this other stuff. I live in Yuba City. And I think the view of all chemtrail views in Yuba City, especially if I go up in the radio station towers and just stand out there and watch the whole lay of the land. We can see these whole chemtrails being laid down day after day after day after day.
On I-50.
And every day for a week to 10 days before the fire, they were coming down heavier and heavier and heavier. And people were actually talking about it. Why are we getting sprayed so much? And then we had the fire. Now, one of the things that's in the chemicals is something called aluminum oxide. Aluminum and oxygen, nanoparticulate matter. They started spraying us with nanoparticulate matter in the 1990s. And it just so happened, now nanoparticulate matter means this. A little cell physiology here. You know, cells are made up of membranes, right? You've probably heard this before. And these nanoparticulate matter are so small, or smaller than salts and so on, they can go right through those membranes, and it's aluminum with oxygen. So in every one of our cells here, in this room, in those trees out there, in those plants, you'll find aluminum oxide. Guaranteed. Your bones will have aluminum oxide in it. You have what's called diversion canals in your bones. They are the arteries and veins inside your bones because your bones use blood. A lot of people don't realize that. So your body is completely saturated with it. With young children, they're very susceptible because it passes through the blood-brain barrier. And in the 1990s, we started to see a rapid spike in autism.
Yep.
There's an absolute correlation to the amount of chem spraying and autism on the planet today. When I was an educator before 1990s, I very seldom saw an autistic child. After that, they're all over the place, aren't they?
Yes.
And there's various
I have
parts
one.
of the spectrum. That's all gone in lockstep with the spraying. This is a worldwide event, this spraying, by the way. So what happens when you take aluminum oxide and you mix it with iron in the soil? The plants take up the iron, and The plants take up the aluminum oxide. And anybody know what you get when you get the combination of iron and aluminum oxide? You get a compound called thermite. That once it's set afire, burns between 3,000 and 4,000 degrees. And if humans are set afire, they'll burn to 3,000 to 4,000 degrees. And it's a flash. That's what was going on. I'm telling you, that's what was going on. I don't care what anybody says. I will go to my grave. I'll go to my ashes or whatever. That's a fact. And I know there's some people, Tommy, you brought your kids up. You saw this stuff. This is what they're doing to us. Jerry Brown and his folks, his one world globalist people. All dark operations. And we're trying to get it out as much as possible. And I think this thing up here, of course, Donald Trump and Ryan Zinke need to be applauded because they pulled the plug on this. When they burned it out, that was it for them. You'll notice that Jerry Brown, or the California government, is not getting the $9 billion they thought they were going to get from this fire. And the other fire is the Woolsey fire, right? They withheld the money because they did not clean the forest. They allowed all the duff to grow up. I used to live in Butte County, and every year their fire people would come by my house and say, hey, have you cleaned the debris? If you don't, here's a $500 ticket. So that was called motivation. They hadn't been doing that for years up there. Why? They put in traffic calming. Why? They're spraying like crazy the chemicals on everybody. Why? That's to get them off the land.
What about minerals?
Minerals? Well, the reactions with the chemicals and the minerals and the electricity and so on.
Just to the mineral rights.
Oh, the mineral rights, yeah. A lot of the globalists want California in the worst way. The globalists want the world. And they want us off the land. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife, every day people go to work and they work on what's called rewilding. Have you ever heard of this? Mm-hmm. We have a map of an area, and what they're going to do is they're going to get people off the land and rewild it so it goes back to its natural state so the animals can come back to 300 years ago, and so on. People are serious about this, and the plan is we've got to leave the rural areas. That's the plan. Yes, sir.
So I just had a question. The purpose for the spraying, is that to kill us off, or what's the?
It worked really well in Paradise.
It did. But do they do it everywhere across
Yes.
the state?
All over the world.
Well, Paul, also, is it the plan to move us back into the cities
City.
to control us?
Better
Yeah.
population control.
It's called stack and pack housing. Stack and pack housing, if you haven't seen it already, there's a lot of places down in LA and Orange County in particular. It's kind of interesting that Bill Clinton, see, he's all part of this. So was George Bush the Senior. Reagan was not. But they were planning all this well before Reagan, during Reagan, in black operations, the deep state. There's always been a deep state. You've seen the results of this. Isn't it just amazing what you're seeing in your lifetime with Donald
Yes.
Trump? And the deep state is really out. They're here.
Mainstream.
It's all mainstream, right? It's supposed to be accepted. But these people are ruthless, murdering monsters. They are the enemies of us. And there's a lot of ways in which they got here, and I'll maybe allude into that in a little bit. But where we're at right now is they want us off the rural lands. And that's why they've been systematically taking away the rights of rural people. And here in America, they started taking away the rights of rural people in 1964 with the decision of Reynolds versus Sims. And in Reynolds versus Sims, they did away with the federal model for representation as it applies to the states. In Reynolds versus Sims, what they did there is they said no more can states have counties where they each have a senator in the county. Isn't that right? Can you elaborate for a second? You can have how many counties as a senator?
Well, we used to have 40 senators in California.
You
Now,
still do.
I'm going to have 11.
Right.
But in Los Angeles, with one county, they have like 20.
I think it's 22 or something.
23.
There's 40. Let's explain this formula for California and see how it works. California has 120 legislators. That's it. I want you to keep that number in mind as I get in later on in the conversation. You have 80 assembly members and you have 40 senators. And that's really how it started back in the day. When California first started, I think there were really 43 counties, and so Alpine and some of these other counties went with bigger counties, and that's how they stuck with the number 40. So, but then, and then each county had its own representative as a senator. Okay, you know there's a fine for being late. All right.
That makes it fine.
That
Mark.
makes the fine
Mark,
double.
can you- Yeah, that one.
Let's see, do we have 2 chairs we can bring back there?
Thank
That's
you.
one. Brent, let's get that one next to you.
Yeah, I'll get that. See, you wore my jacket.
Because Paul moved over here, so.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you.
Or we're gonna go over there.
So we have the situation where we have 120 legislators, that's it. And you have one senator, how many? 11 counties? Yeah. And Nielsen, how many does he have? 7?
I think so, I think.
Yeah, 7. Okay, so now let's talk about this. A county is a county is a county. A state is a state is a state. And we have what's called a bicameral legislature. And we have a legislature, talking about the federal model, where you have a House of Representatives and then you have a Senate. And the Senate has the same exact power as the House. Okay? One is not supposed to have more power than the other. You have more people, 430 some more people as House of Representatives and 100 senators. Senators represent states. They represent the state. The states have rights, believe it or not. States have rights. And to represent those states and their rights, in our bicameral legislature, they are given 2 senators for each state. And for the state, that's a balance of power for every state. Every state has 2. So there's equal power there for the states. And then when you take it into the House, and you have the House with 435, they divide it up, I think they got 1 million or whatever a piece. They represent the masses of people. But what happened in Reynolds versus Sims was this. It's very sinister, and it's all part of what is happening today. Don't think it wasn't. This is a plan, a big plan that's been going on literally since 1776 and even before that, but more so 1776, and I'll tie it all together. But what happened in Reynolds versus Sims in 1964 is they decided, well, you know, we don't have enough people to represent the people. So what we're going to do is we know that counties don't have equal population now, do they? Just like states. Montana, they get 2 senators. I think they've got 1 or 2 members of the House of Representatives. Now California, we have 2 senators and we've got 53 members of the House. That's because we have 39 million people. Now that makes sense to represent the people, doesn't it? Well, who's going to represent the interest of the state? The 2 senators. And they're going to represent that interest in the Capitol, in the bicameral legislature, where they have equal power. So you will not have an overbearance of representation and overpowering of one house over the other. Do you guys get that? Because what happens if you take all these, let's say you take 50 senators away, and you give them the responsibilities of being members of the House of Representatives, representing people, then you have Reynolds versus Sims. So what happened in Reynolds versus Sims is this. They said no more will senators represent counties in America, in the states. What that means is this. We have state senators. Our state senators no longer represent the 58 counties. Oh no. They represent by population. What's the number for a state senator in population?
About 750,000.
About 750,000 people. Now that, in terms of Reynolds versus Sims, is wonderful. That means we got more of a democracy going on, more representation for the citizens by way of the Senate. But what does that do to the balance of power in the Senate and in our assembly. It brings more people over here, doesn't it? And there's less representation of the area known as a county. Counties have people, they have assets, and they have all sorts of things that go on there, school, education, all the things that go into an entity of a county is the consideration for the senator. That's the way it's supposed to be. Just like senators in the nation, their consideration is everything that goes on in the state. I mean, what would it be like without any of the Dakotas right now in terms of oil? Right? We have that because we have 2 senators in each one of the Dakotas. They have representation as a state. So matters that belong to the state get considered in the Senate. And oftentimes it's the people who want to get at it, but they can't because the Senate won't let them. Now here in California, I'm going to take this model to California, the federal model. It was blown up, and now we have senators in California that are divided up by 7, not represent a county any longer. 11 counties, 7 counties. I talked to Jim Nielsen one time. I said, "Hey Jim, how do you do that?" He says, "I don't, and you won't either, will you?" Honestly, I mean, this is an honest question here. I'm going to try and get an honest answer from a potential politician. I'm sure that I will, but I don't want you to put them on the hook for this, because this is real stuff. This is real stuff, and real lives matter. You can't represent the interests of the 11 counties, can you?
It's hard to do.
Now that's a good political answer. All right, you got it. That's my point. There is no possible way, I'll take it from here. There is no possible way that he can represent the interest of those 11 counties individual. It's just impossible for him to do that. So what he's doing is, like other senators in other states, they're just saying, "Hey, is it good there? Yeah, it's good there. Listen to that advice." They don't take a long time to consider the ramifications of legislation that's created now in the houses and in the assemblies. So it leads to chaos. And what it does is, because it's apportioned now, senators like in Los Angeles, there's 12 million people down there. There's only 40 senators, and they've got 22 or 23 of them. We have 2 or 3. We do. Is that fair?
No.
And you can see what happens. You can get a mono-party system very easily, can't you? Because you have a mono-party setup. It's all a mono-party setup. Reynolds versus Sims was all about taking power away from the individual counties in a state and concentrating it in one house, the assembly, or in an assembly-like house. You're forcing senators to really kind of make decisions that should be made alone in an assembly, in the assembly, and not be influenced by the fact that they represent all these different counties. That's a very bad position to be in. I'm sure agreeing with that. That's a bad position to put these people in. So there's lack of representation overall. That's why we're not represented. Who's going to stick up for these people up here in Oroville, in Paradise, or down in Woolsey? Who's going to stick up for these people? You know, I feel sorry for Gallagher and Jim Gallagher, who I love Jim Gallagher, he's a great guy, and also Jim Nielsen. It's impossible for them to represent. It's absolutely impossible. And they don't know they don't have power or authority. It's all diffused by all the legislators in the House, and in the Assembly, and in the Senate that work together. Because now in California, after we got the Reynolds versus Sims thing taken care of, that was in 1964, then a guy by the name of Jess Unruh comes along and he says, "Wow, my opportunity to put in a professional style legislature." That was the word, wasn't it? He wanted a more professional style legislature, because this idea that in the Constitution in California you could meet once every 2 years as a legislature. Oh, we can't do that. We're a growing state. We've got this, we got that. We have to have a legislature that's professional.
And full-time.
And full-time. Oh, we forgot about that. What just happened? And full-time. I put the seed there though, didn't I? That's because the original Constitution in California, like Texas, you'll notice that the traffic on these caravans go to the two only republics in the nation, California and Texas. Notice that. Just a little aside out there. But what happens is now you've got this full-time legislature in California. They meet 11 months out of the year. Anybody work in the legislature? Come on. I know there's people that...
Yeah, where's Don?
Anyway, so this legislature's run amok, hasn't it? Now that started to go and really get out of control after the 1994 Orange County bankruptcy. A Cloward and Piven strategy, which started me, in a lot of ways, understanding what is going on in California. And the Cloward and Piven strategy in Orange County was designed to bankrupt Orange County, and it worked. They basically jacked up interest rates, and Orange County couldn't pay the money that was supposed to go out, and pretty soon they had to declare bankruptcy. And then what happened, there's a complete shattering of confidence of the Republican Party because it was the Orange County supervisors that let that go. And the blame started to go. And pretty soon Republicans started to get picked off. And by 1996, the next election, California went Democrat and has never gone back in the Assembly or the Senate. Never gone back. A few times we've had, governors like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Rhino.
Wonderful socialist that he is, right? And Gray, I'm just
Gray
saying,
Davis.
we've been given a bone or two. But the system now, they started gaming it through the changing of the Constitution by it was Prop 1A, I think, in 1996, which matched up, really, isn't that funny how that proposition matched right up to Reynolds versus Sims in 1964? Because it did. So you have Reynolds versus Sims in 64, then you have California leading the way with a full-time legislature. I want you to think of the potential of a full-time legislature. I'll come back in a second. So you have the full-time legislature going on. By 1990, people are going, wow, this is pretty good stuff. Jerry Brown, you just had 8 years of him. Everybody's freaking out. Then all of a sudden they say, this guy named Willie Brown, this guy from San Francisco, he's the Speaker of the Assembly, and he's got way too much power. So what should we do to him?
Term limits.
There it is, term limits. Term limits. Everybody's got to have term limits. I'm sorry, you can only go 4 years. That's it, you're turned out as an assembly person. That's 2 elections. Senate, you can go 1. So that went on for 12 years. Then all of a sudden everybody started realizing that the 18-year-old who was writing legislation in some assembly members, I'm right, aren't I? Because I know these things. The 18-year-old who was writing legislation and getting it out on the floor and getting laws passed, man, that was awesome. Get these 18-year-olds in there, sometimes 17, or friends of friends who come in, just happen to come in off the wall and say, can you help us write legislation today? Sure, what do we need to do? Let's go have a joint and we'll figure it out.
Welcome to California.
It's real stuff. So all of a sudden things started to really go askew in the late 90s. But never fear, they brought, they had the legislature come, or a proposition come in, I think it was Prop 144 in 1990. That's going to handle everything because we know that this whole thing about term limits will work its way out. But here's the key thing about term limits, which is a really wonderful thing about Prop 144. In that proposition, what they decided was put in a little bit of language about the governor. That governor can only serve 2 terms. That governor can only serve 2 terms. By God, 8 years, that's it, he's done, goodbye. Except, that will only apply to governors that run after November of 1990. There was one person who had already served 2 terms as governor that was possibly eligible for that language.
Jeez.
And I bet you know his name.
Mr. Mayor Brown.
Mr. Brown. Jerry Brown. You go look it up. It's right there. It's about 9 or 10 words long. And that's how he got to be governor a 3rd and 4th term. And all along, what's going on Education's being eroded from 1990 to 2000. You've got the over-regulation starting to kick in. And you've got a 24/7, 365 legislature, as I call it, pumping out those laws. And pretty soon you got a huge bureaucracy. Well, you know, we have a jobs program, don't we? Yeah, we can hire, you know, 10,000 people to work in the Capitol just to write bills. What could possibly go wrong there? So then, the Republican Party of California and its leadership in 2008 says, you know, those Democrats, they have too much power. We're going to redistrict them. So they helped to set up a proposition that ran to come up with the Citizens Commission on redistricting. You know how legislators get their districts. Here's the state first. And then they decided, well, you know, it's so good for the state. By 2010, we'll run a similar proposition so that the federal representatives, the House of Representatives, members of the House, they'll get their new districts too. Now, what could possibly go wrong about that? You know, one of the things that bothered me about the commission, I studied them. They would oftentimes have their meetings in Guajardo, Mexico. I just thought I'd throw that little hand grenade out there. I mean, why would they do that? I called them up because I'm doing the radio thing. Right? I call them up and go, why would you possibly want? Well, there's people down there too. I said, yeah, they're non-citizens. Why are we doing that? That started in 2012. Now, I wonder why that was happening. So then, on top, I'm sorry, I forgot the best one. On top of the 2008 and 2010 propositions, he also had another proposition that was sponsored by, by the way, all three were sponsored and paid for by Charles Munger Jr. You know who he is? He was the president of the Republican Party of California. He and Jim Brulte. I'm not a fan of Jim. He knows me and I know him, and he knows I'm not a fan. Okay. And all statements apply truthfully from my part. But anyway, so the system was gamed by the next thing in 2010. The top two. The top two candidates that will go on after the primary, regardless of party affiliation. Wow, that's good for the Republicans, huh? Let's see, well, I don't know how that could be possibly. It was sold as good for the Republicans by the Republican Party. Now you go figure why. You would already have the Democrats in power, sometimes with a supermajority in the Assembly and the Senate, and this is somehow supposed to help the Republicans by redistrict them and go in and bring in Democrats and carve up conservative districts. Isn't that what happened? Yep. And that way you can get more Democrats that will win in the primary, and then that way when you go to the general, it will just be Democrat versus Democrat. Right, Paul?
That's right.
Ran for Senate against Dianne Feinstein. And then you all saw it this year voting. How many of you voted? Now, come on, put your hands down. You didn't get to vote. I should say, all right, how many of you voted? Let's get, okay, how many of you voted, but how many of you voted votes were counted?
Nope.
0. I should have asked it the right way.
So in other words, why vote? Because of
And this whole, oh, yes, sir.
I
Yeah.
just want to, there's one you left out, and that is the same business folks put forward the ballot measure, which was adopted, which removed the 2/3 requirement for the budget to be adopted in California.
Right.
Which means now a simple majority passes and has passed for the last several years, the budget.
Right.
Which removed whatever left vestige of Republicans in the district to be able to stop some of the crap, pardon my French.
Yeah.
Removed it.
Right. Right. So that's another big, I mean, there's a bunch of those too that all the way, as they got more control and consolidated, especially under Jerry Brown coming back as governor, then obviously things started to swing completely towards one party system. And that's why when you listen to the radio show or you listen to our grievances, we call it a mono-party system in California, led by a dictator. Because there's no way that Gavin Newsom really won the election. And we know that in the election of 2014 and 16, there's no way Jerry Brown won that one. 2016. It's really doubtful about 2010. But the system is so gamed, and I was part of the people that were being questioned by the White House and other people about what I thought about the election system, and we had all these people coming on my show and everything. And it was pretty obvious that around by 2016 with Bernie Sanders, you know, he should have beat Hillary badly. And by most estimates, Trump beat Hillary badly in California. But the suppression of the vote is complete now in 2018. Rest assured, it's complete. Our votes do not count. They have passed laws that mean that whatever illegal activity about vote counting was out there before is now legal. Ballot harvesting.
Disgusting.
Pardon?
Disgusting.
That's not a ballot initiative, is it? Yeah, maybe it will be. But you get my drift. So what's happened when you start taking a look at sanctuary state, when you start taking a look at the education system that's really run by UC Berkeley, they're the ones who run it. And who's in charge of the UC system? Janet Napolitano. Now what possibly could go wrong there? Oh, I know about the guy who was doing her budgets year in and year out. There's a possibility with this one. He was arrested. Did you guys hear about this? He was working on the UC budget system, and he was arrested because he decided when he was in the Air Force as an Air Force captain that he'd desert. So he deserted in 1983. And you know what his specialty was? His specialty was knowing how to do electronic systems to detonate missiles when they were launched. He showed up working for Janet Napolitano, and he was arrested, and right now he's in the brig at Travis Air Force Base. Thank you, Jeff Sessions. And what's this guy's name? Howard Hughes Jr. He's related to Howard Hughes, but no, they're from Seattle, the Hughes family. I don't know about you, but that's called weird, isn't it? Yeah, they're investigating him for the explosion on the Challenger.
Really?
Yeah. He knew all the missile codes. The French want him because he was responsible for, they think, for dozens of missiles that misfired from the French military. We want him, and a lot of other countries do too. That's who was working for Janet Napolitano, who heads our UC system right now. And of course, she was the one that anybody who was a constitutionalist, when she was Department of Homeland Security, had to be rounded up like the usual suspects, right? So God forbid we're talking about the Constitution. I'm glad she's at the UC system right now. So, what do we say about California? I'll just put it to you in a nutshell. It's a failed state.
Yes.
It's completely failed. Everything about California governance system is completely failed. You have a monoparty system, which is a dictatorship. You do not have a representative Republican form of government any longer. You have a dictatorship. You have a democracy. And everybody tells you we have a democracy, right? And we have to do the preservation of the democracy and all that good stuff. Don't you hear? I heard it 3 or 4 times on the way down here tonight. Everybody says it, so therefore it must be good. Is that right? That's not right, is it? No. A democracy is chaos. It's a mob mentality. It's a dictatorship. That's democracy. You know, I tell the story all the time. You may have heard this, but there's 3 animals and it's dinner time. And so they say, well, let's make it democratic for dinner. How many of you want to eat meat tonight? 2 paws go up, 1 goes down. Well, the one that went down, of course, was the lamb, and the other 2 were wolves. That's democracy. We're not supposed to be in a democracy. The Constitution doesn't say anything about a democracy. In fact, our founding fathers went the opposite direction of a democracy, the term. Not in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or the Declaration of Independence will you find the word democracy, because it means dictatorship. And so what is the mainstream media and everybody on the left, and even our Republicans, who, by the way, are starting to catch themselves. I've been listening to this because I do listening for a living. They're starting to catch themselves and realize, like what we put out every day in our grievances, and we're up to 52 now, that we are a Republican form of governance. And in fact, when you come, I know you're all going to be at the convention, right?
Yes.
And I'll just tell you, this is as blunt as it can get. This is the only time in your lifetime that you'll be able to say you were at a constitutional convention, a real one. doing real things to change the world like the Founding Fathers did.
I was gonna say, we're the new founding fathers.
You are, and mothers.
Yeah.
Me too.
But I mean this in all sincerity.
And checked out physically, so there's no
Right. We know who's this.
misgenderization.
Right. We won't have that. But in all seriousness, with all of us, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. And the significance means enormous things for this world. For the world. I'm not being catty about this. For the world. And I'm giving you information that you have to carry forward to tell other people about the Constitution and what we're doing here and how important it is. We will save this world. I don't want to put pressure on you, but I think I should because it's all been on me. I want to share it, you know. But you now have a responsibility based on some of the things I'm telling you. And I'm going to tell you a few more things that are really going to tie it up for you so you really feel like you have to scream out the door at what's going on here. Remember, you are a minority, but as things go, numbers grow, and one-on-one is the best way to tell people, trust me. It brings regimes down, proven over time. It's the only way to stop these people. But what we are going to be doing is setting up and reestablishing the tenets of Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. In Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, there's all these articles. If you take a look at the any Constitution, they'll say Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and they all have subsets about the belief systems and about how the country is supposed to be run. Article 4, Section 3 is the Guarantee Clause. And the Guarantee Clause says three things in it. This is going to blow your mind if you haven't heard this before. How many have not heard this stated yet about Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution? Article 4, Section 4. Article 4, Section 3 is the process by which we're following. I'll explain that in a second. The bottom line to what we're trying to get to is Article 4, Section 4, and the three elements. First part of the elements of the Article 4, Section 4. The United States government, the federal government, must guarantee to you and you and you and you and you and you and you, everybody in this room, a Republican form of government. Did I say democratic? No. The Founding Fathers knew that was a dictatorship. Think of the wolves. They knew that that would lead to the destruction and death of everybody in the country.
Wow.
A Republican form of government is a representative government, like that bicameral legislature with equal power between the Senate and the Assembly or House of Representatives. Everybody has equal power, but you get the representation of all areas. A senator in a state includes everything in the state, not just people. And the House, that includes the people of the state. That's just sort of logical. But you don't have one overbearing on the other. That's not republicanism. That's not a republic. That's a democrat system. That's a democracy. That's mobocracy. And they guaranteed in the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, the very first guarantee was a Republican form of government. No more eating the lamb. The second thing, and some of you will be surprised by this, Article 4, Section 4 states that we are guaranteed to be free from invasion. Freedom from invasion. Now, let's see. I must be talking about the caravans. How many know that I'm talking about that? Okay, we got to work. Well, this is serious work going on right now. Okay, we are being openly invaded.
That's right.
And we have been so dumbed down that we don't understand that in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, we have a freedom from invasion that has to be guaranteed by the president, the executive branch. He swore an oath, as did many of the people in this room who are now part of New California. To be a part, an executive part, and the leadership part in the counties of New California, you have to be sworn in to the Constitution. Period, end of subject. If you don't like it, go to Cuba. We treat it serious. We're the only act in town in the nation doing this.
Maybe that's where Beto should go, because he's been saying lately that why do we need the Constitution?
Francis?
Oh, yeah.
Francis?
Francis,
Beto?
or
Catholic.
The Mexican. I know, that was just a
You know
joke.
he's not.
Yeah, I know he's not. And I'm from Texas too.
So if we are guaranteed freedom from invasion, why is it happening? And why in the world are they fighting the president so much when he has a mandate to do that? You know, if he does not do what he's doing right now, he's open for impeachment.
They all are.
Get it? He has to follow that. And he has to guarantee a Republican form of government. And finally, the third thing, and I want you to think of the faces from this. Freedom from violence, domestic violence. You know, like we just have had our police officers shot. Natalie Coleman, Renelle Singh, and where's my little vest here? Oh, that's fine.
What about
Natalie Corona?
Natalie Corona. Did I say Natalie Corona?
Yeah.
No, you
Say
said.
Coleman.
Uh-huh.
I did that on the radio the other day too. Somebody called me out on it too. This vest was there. Many of you were there at the funeral of Renelle Singh. And we set ourselves up in full display to the nation and the world. Fox News, everybody was there. They covered what we were doing. We have donned the Gilets jaunes. And the reason we have done this is, yes, to support the French Gilets jaunes. And you know what they're doing? They're out there supporting exactly what we're supporting. Somebody hit the phone.
That's
Come on.
me, I'm sorry.
It's Jerry Brown calling.
You're under arrest.
But when you break it down, you watch what's going on with Gilets jaunes, they are fighting the same globalists we're fighting. It comes down to that. Macron, who's a Rothschild, look what he's doing to those people, exactly what's happening to us. Over taxation, over regulation, pushing out the squeeze in the middle class. Problem in Europe, and if you've been to Europe, you know what I'm talking about, there's no place to go. If you're not going to solve that problem and be an escapist like we can do in this country and go to Idaho, you have to sit there and bear it, right?
Jeez.
As a European. Well, you know, it's interesting about the French when they do revolutions, they break out the guillotines.
I was just gonna say.
They have a different way of doing revolutions than we do. We have a constitution. Which brings me to Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. It's only been exercised 3 times in this nation's history. Article 4, Section 3. Article 4, Section 3 is the state split clause. And what it says, or guarantee, and what it says is that if a group of people in a state want to form a state from a pre-existing state, then they can do so by going directly to the representatives of their respective states. Now let me break it out for you. You had the 3-state initiative, right? Well, how many thought we were the 3-state thing? I mean, I get that all the time. Are you a 3-state thing? No, we're not a 3-state. I don't have a budget of $5 million. I can't blow that. But the 3-state thing was interesting because I interviewed Draper in 2012 and 10 when he was trying to do the 6-state, right? And I told him, I said, you know, gosh, Tim, can I call you Tim? Tim, there's a problem with your theory here. You have to follow the Constitution. I don't need no Constitution. Constitution's dead. It doesn't mean anything. I'll write this up and they'll pass it. Okay. And so then, all of a sudden, and this is kind of interesting, we start up as New California. We started up from the Jefferson movement. Jefferson movement wanted to just go to a court case. A lot of things went on there. And we broke away and said, they're going about it wrong. They'll never become a state, which is true today. They decided to do the little lawsuit. And they did the little lawsuit because they're standing, and they lost in the lawsuit, which we knew they would. They were trying to fight Reynolds versus Sims in the court, which is not the way to do it. So they came up with this whole thing about trying to form a state, and then they fell flat on their face, and they'll never be a state. But they're still out there fundraising to make a state. So then we said, wait a minute, we are going to do it the right way constitutionally and follow Article 4, Section 3. And I got to tell you, we had some pretty good attorneys advising us. Pretty good attorneys who get it about how this works. And what I'm about to tell you is really kind of funny because there's a couple of people you see on TV that are constitutional attorneys that appear on certain large conservative TV shows. But anyway, they called me and they wanted to know how I'm doing all this because they couldn't figure out what we're doing. Anyway, so I said, well, it's kind of interesting. I'm following Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. They did not know in one case that Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution had only been used 3 times in our history to form a state. All the rest of them were territories or by agreements before the Constitution even came out, like Vermont and New York. Vermont decided with New York and negotiated with those people before a Constitution was written to form a new state. But once it happened, they realized in that situation, we have to have something in the Constitution that will allow our country to grow and also give us some defense. Because we know that we've got these experiments in states out there. And we know there's probably a possibility that you're going to get a bad actor governor and system, and that system is going to want to become more totalitarian and dictatorial, which is what they escaped, of course, coming from Europe with all the monarchs and kings and queens and all that good stuff, and the religious leaders. So they put in a little escape valve, and that's called Article 4, Section 3. Now in this, I'm going to repeat this so you kind of get this, that we as citizens can come together and work directly with the legislatures concerned. That does not say anywhere about going out and getting a petition by the Secretary of State of the state we're in, getting signatures, going back to that same secretary, getting on a ballot, and get a vote. It doesn't say that. Does it? Did you hear me say that? No, it means we, the citizens, go out and we meet directly with the legislatures concerned. So this is what that means. The governor doesn't mean anything. First time I said this, it was on One American News. Graham Ledger was asking me a question. I said, well, Jerry Brown's not involved here. He's meaningless to this process. He's irrelevant. And I thought the camera was going to crack. Jerry Brown. I said, he's irrelevant. He has nothing to do with this system. Nothing to do with us. We don't care about him. It's mind over matter. We don't mind. He does not matter. And he doesn't. Nor does the Secretary of State, anybody, none of the county people. They don't matter. The only people that matter to us are the state legislators, 120 of them. Which, by the way, is not a big number for the populated state of 39 million. It should be triple that number. But no, they wanted the power within centralized areas, so they decided, oh, we're going to keep those numbers together. 120 since 1879, that's been the number of legislators. Now it's coming back to bite them in the butt. Because for us to convince 40 senators and 80 assembly members is not going to be difficult at all. When you consider that the pressure on them will be the citizenship of 18 million Californians. Oh, by the way, they're all conservative. You see, what happened, and it has to go back to West Virginia, 1861, because we're following that model. In West Virginia, 1861, Civil War had just started, and they had a whole bunch of conventions, if you will, in the southern states about whether or not they're going to form a confederacy, and they were going to secede. And so all the different states had them, and that's how basically we got the Confederacy. They all had an agreement, ran some bills in legislatures, in their own legislatures, and they agreed to leave the federal government. Well, come to Virginia, they had this problem called West Virginia. See, the West Virginians didn't like slavery. They were more in line with the Ohioans and the Pennsylvanians, and they didn't really cotton too much to the plantation life of Virginia. So they saw this whole thing coming and said, we're going to form a new state. How do we do this? They said, well, the other two places, which I think was Maine and Kentucky, they got citizens together in counties, and then they met with their legislature, and the legislature did the minimum they had to do to approve it through a proposition, not a proposition, but a, what is it called? Resolution. That's the minimum legal level of statute that has to go through. And they got them convinced that they could form their own state, and then they went on to the Congress. And the Congress makes the final decision. So you have to get agreement by the state first. That's what I was saying. Get the agreement by the legislators concerned. So West Virginia They ran a constitutional convention, and lo and behold, in Richmond, the people in Richmond said, we're going to go ahead and go become a Confederate state. So that set everything in motion for West Virginia. They met again for a second time in Wheeling, West Virginia. And by that time, that's the bills and so on that was going through Virginia had already passed their legislature. They were put to a vote by the people, and they were out of here, leaving Virginia high and dry. They couldn't get approval for Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. There was no place to appeal to. Virginia was gone. They were part of the Confederate. They're out of the Union. So what good is the Constitution there? So they appealed to the federal government. And the federal government said, well, you're out of luck. Sorry, West Virginia. You just didn't get there in time. You still have to satisfy Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution, where you meet with the legislature concerned, and then you can bring it to the Congress. So I don't know, if you go and read the history of this, it's quite phenomenal, because imagine right now in our world, right here, right today, that what's happening around us, people are being murdered, beheaded, burned. See, all that was happening in Virginia at the same time, too. I'm making it a little real to you, because a lot of people don't, they look at Virginia and West Virginia, they think it was just simple times. But there was a lot of murderous stuff going on in West Virginia. And there was a lot of fighting back and forth between the Confederates and the Yankees, if you will, those that wanted to stay in Virginia and those that didn't. People were being slaughtered wholesale. This is the thing where you, in one of the movies you saw in the Revolutionary War, where they burned people in churches stuff, right? Kind of things that happened in Paradise, California. So what they did is this: they were sitting there in Wheeling, and a guy in one of the guys, his name was Pierpont. You can look this up. His name was Pierpont, and they're saying, you know, we got to figure this thing out, else we're not going to be a state, and we're going to be sucked into this war as a Confederate state, and we want to go with the Yankees. So Pierpont looks around and goes, well, you know what? I'm going to be the new governor of Virginia. And they all looked at him like, you're looking at me like, what? What? He says, no, I'm going to be the governor of Virginia. And we're going to create, and back then, and by the way, West Virginia was known as New Virginia. That's what it was called. He said, I'm going to be the Virginia government. I'm going to be that governor, and I'm going to set up a government. And everybody's looked at him and said, pass the Jack Daniels and let's think about it. So they went and talked, and in a few hours they came back, and they're all happy going, you know, that Pierpont starts to make sense. We think we can do this. So he appointed a lieutenant governor, he appointed a secretary of state, attorney general, he appointed all kinds of people, and he got some people that were still in Virginia who did not want to go, and they came over as senators and assembly members and so on, and he formed a government. And they went to the federal government, and they said, hey, we have this restored government called Virginia, the restored Virginia government. Will that satisfy the requirement to meet Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution? And they said, yes, it will. The Congress said, yes, it will. And the president's going, yeah, another Confederate state gone. I get a Union state. So he's happy. So 2 years later, well, of course, the rest is history. The restored government approved. First thing they did, oh yeah, you're done. We approved you guys. It went on to the Congress, and the Congress approved, and 2 years later it became a state, 1863. We are in the same boat right now. The boat that they were in was in a state of what's called insurrection. And the Insurrection Act was not enacted until 1807. And it was a direct result of that. That if a state is in a point of insurrection, be it economic or war or whatever, the president has the authority to call out the military to quell it and to bring a new government on board and restore order. 1807. We believe in New California, California is in an absolute state of insurrection. We believe that we are not guaranteed Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution at all. We are being denied a Republican form of government.
That's right.
We are not free from invasion. We're being invaded. We're being killed by these invaders. And by the way, I don't blame these people. Do not blame the illegal immigrants coming across the border. They're the ones being manipulated behind the scenes by rogue military operators from other countries around the world. And then they're being enabled by churches on this side of the border. Large organized church organizations that want the money that all these illegal foreign nationals bring so they can give them shelter and food and clothing. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. All the church organizations are involved for the most part. One's bigger than another. There's a price on these people's head. I call it modern-day slavery. And it's actually, it's nothing more than slavery that's being promulgated by various church organizations in a lot of ways, helped by pseudo or quasi-military organizations from various state actors. Obama put in several presidential authorizations for this. The Welcoming Americans Act, the New Communities Act, and the Immigration Act is something, there's another name to it. Those three things combined in 2013 and 14 have helped and fostered this setup, this organization. Funding comes from the U.S. government for these organizations in Texas, in California. That's why these people are being lured, because it's big money. And the big money goes to the cartels and these organizations on this side of the border. That is criminal. That's what Trump is fighting. Except he's got to shut the border down because we are being invaded. This is an invasion.
Yes, it is.
It's an invasion of sorts where you're going to depopulate one population and replace it with another. And what they've done here in California is really very clever. I saw this in the 1990s. Ward Conley saw it at the university system in 1996. And he actually offered, I think it was Prop 206, I think it was. And what was happening in the university system, I was counseling students, we were getting kids off to college and all that stuff. That was part of our job as school administrators. And we found about 1993, 94, it was getting really difficult to get our kids into the UC system.
Yes.
And we noticed it was the white boys to begin with. I mean, blatant discrimination. And Ward Conley recognized that. The black man serving on the regents, he said, wait a minute, UC system is doing something really bad here. So he ran Prop 206, which won, which was supposed to stop the discrimination. So then, a few years later, not only were we not getting the boys in, but the white girls were getting in. And then we noticed that the Asian kids weren't getting in. Then the Mexican kids weren't getting in. And the black kids weren't getting in. Our kids were not getting in. And so what was the commonality? Forget about race, forget about ethnicity. It was because they were American citizens.
Wow.
And by 2003 and 4, if you're an American citizen trying to get in the UC system, niet nada, not going to happen for you. They were shutting down the higher education system so more foreign illegal nationals can come and join because they get more money for them, number one. But it's also a what? It's a way to get out the American citizens from California. Now the next thing that they've been doing this for a long time, is illegal foreign nationals get your jobs. If you want a government job, illegal foreign nationals get the government job. Down in Southern California, it's really a problem. I was on the phone again today. I have this guy who calls me from the Rialto area, a veteran. He was injured in Kuwait. He's been injured for quite some time in the Navy. And he can't find a job. He's got all the problems in the world. And he's Filipino. He was born in the Philippines and he's a naturalized American citizen. Gee, where you hear this story, right? Naturalized American citizen. He went and served the country. And he can't get a job. And he thought he had a heads up because he was Filipino. And he kept on trying to push that narrative, and he finally realized it wasn't because he wasn't getting a job, it was because he was an American citizen. And that's going on I get letters from San Bernardino, Riverside, Los Angeles area down there, Orange County, letters, emails, texts, phone calls. It's heart-wrenching what I'm hearing from these people.
Try walking through Google. We did that, Will Johnson and Ben Bergbaum and
Right.
Marco. We walked through Google. Everybody was a foreigner. And they were looking at us like we had 3 heads because we had the American flag.
Right.
At least you have a cute head.
Yeah.
Well, that, you know, this is why I say we are a failed state all the way around, and it's being deliberately done. So if you think it's a racial thing or whatever, it's not. It is not. It's an American thing.
That's what it was.
It's an American thing. They're trying. If you're an American citizen, they want you out. And what's happened to the California the middle class? Everything's gamed against it. So that's why we say it's a failed state. That's why we're doing what we're doing in New California. Everything's failed. The Republican Party's failed. Democratic. There's no party system anymore. And you're never going to get back to a real election scheme in California unless you do something drastic, and that something drastic is called New California. We'll come in with a brand new constitution that'll forbid all this stuff. The taxes will go down to just about 15%. You won't have all the problems that you have with the California Air Resources Board. And how do you like what the Coastal Commission did today?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's just amazing. 2 to 5 foot rise in the oceans by 2100.
Yeah,
The
right.
sad part is people are gonna believe that.
Right, well,
Not the owner.
They want to believe.
they want you to believe it. So we're doing the convention on Saturday the 26th. It's very historic. We are going to be actually in communication with the White House. We've been asked to send our work product from this convention to Donald Trump. And Saturday night afterwards, we will do just that. And he wants to read it Sunday morning the 27th, which is 2 days before the State of the Union, if they have one. I find it really interesting that they don't want to do the State of the Union with some of the things on the plate, including New California.
Paul, would you let the audience know where they could get the information for that?
You can go to Agenda 21, excuse me, sorry, that's the radio, see the radio thing comes up. You go to newcaliforniastate.com, newcaliforniastate.com, and click on the top button there. It says convention. You can get your tickets there and all that stuff. Also, this flyer is very important because it talks about some of the other stuff that's not on the website yet. If you get that, it explains the ticketing, all the things that's basically on the website.
Let me look at it.
We want everybody's support. I'll tell you why. If you're not, we just want to pack the house. I'll tell you that right now because we want Donald Trump to see there are a lot of people there that want to reclaim California.
Thank you.
And that's really important. That's why we want to get the word out. He will know what's going on. It's funny how these guys work. It's certainly changed and altered my life, that's for sure.
You want to know about the speakers?
The speakers, Kevin Snyder from Pacific Justice Institute will be there. Christine Street will be there. And one other person, I guess, right? Who's the other person? I can't remember right offhand.
You.
Well, me a little bit, yeah. It'll be exciting. It'll be exciting because you're going to see our government in action for New California for the 3rd time. You'll see them pass resolutions. The first part of the morning, the resolutions that are going to be passed concern the architecture of the Constitution. They're going to put together for the first time the framework of the Constitution with about 20, maybe 24 articles. They have to sort that out. You'll watch the Assembly do this, and you'll watch the Senate do that, and then they'll come together for a joint resolution. And then you'll see us sign the Declaration of Independence because we have not done that officially yet. We've passed it, approved it, and all that stuff, but now we will sign it. And the third thing, of course, we'll be passing these resolutions that will basically explain why we feel that we are in a state of insurrection in the United States, here in California. We, in our grievances, we're up to 52, we state succinctly that we believe we are in a state of insurrection. And at the very end of the grievance, we always pray to the President that he will declare California in a state of insurrection. We've been doing this now for 20 weeks. And just last week, it started on Alex Jones, and then it was all of a sudden on MSNBC. And then people started using the word California insurrection. Somebody is listening.
Amen.
Because if you are, I mean, you have to be really with the blinders on to not recognize that this is a state of insurrection. Now, and we're the early birds who are aware of this. We are awakened to this. And you know a lot now about what's going on. And you know these are truths. But the masses don't know yet. And we have an advantage because we do know this information and we can get it out and we can promulgate it and we can head off a disaster. When we first met in the Declaration of Independence process that we did the days of forming the Declaration of Independence, we ran some numbers. What were the numbers, Russ, that will probably die from a revolution in California or the nation?
Oh, on which, on the education?
No, the number of deaths. Remember that?
California Revolution.
California, if we were to have a revolution or civil war.
We'll look at-
He ran the actual numbers, he can't remember.
But we know, it's right, but it was running in the 20 million range.
It was 35 million. 35 million deaths.
Is there 39.5 million in California?
Yeah, but that's the United States, because it won't just stay at California.
Oh, it's just.
No, please.
I'll keep it.
This is a nationwide thing.
Yeah.
They're gonna kill lots of people in the nation. They're in other states right now. This whole thing has been an invasion of the United States. So don't just think it's gonna be isolated. We will be taking a big hit because we're the most populous, but the rest of the nation is really at risk. You know, they are busing people in. George Soros paying for it. They're busing hundreds of people into these small little towns. You'll have 4,000 or 5,000 people show up at night, in the middle of the night, unload from the buses, and the town's only got 1,000 people in it. Now, what kind of strategy is that called?
Democracy.
Invasion.
Cloward and Piven. But it's an invasion, right? Same thing. Cloward and Piven is a form of invasion. That's been going on all over the place. And by the way, those of you who think Idaho is the place to be, got a lot of communities over there that have been invaded.
I'm sure.
And they're dealing with it.
Yeah, they deal with it.
So, anyway, any questions?
The way they've been invaded is that when Obama said he would take hundreds of thousands of Syrians and other Middle Eastern people, he then figured out where in the country he could put them. And so where they ended up is they have whole groups of cities around the country where they do not speak English, where they have Sharia law, and where the police are not even allowed to go, and they're in places that you would never, ever expect. Utah was key. Northern Maine was key. Nebraska was key. That's where these people are being put.
What about
and they're
Montana?
being fed and housed and given stipends for clothing and so forth by this federal government. And it is almost unknown. Lewiston, Maine, a place that I know well. I played ice hockey there for a number of years against them. You know, and so you could imagine a modest town in the middle of Maine. Think of what it could look like. It looked a lot like, what's the name of the TV show?
Mayberry.
Mayberry?
No, the one about Alaska.
Oh.
Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
It looked a lot like Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
I would go out and we'd have a hockey game. Half the audience from the town was yelling at you in French. So now you go there, you can recognize Lewiston, Maine. There's Muslims everywhere. They don't speak English. They're overtaking the whole city. And Maine doesn't know what the hell to do about it, and that's one of the reasons we've been called from Maine and from the other cities I talked about before Paul came here. Can we help them? Can we help them separate? But, okay, I want to,
Right.
and so we will. We will. As I said, it starts the 21st with Nevada. We need help at the convention on the 26th. So Placer's is hosting the whole state. So I would like to show them that we're terrific, which we are. So I've solicited the help of not only Placer, but Butte, Sutter, and Yuba from north of us, and then here, El Dorado and Sacramento. So if we could get some help, it starts at 6 in the morning, some of that's on there. And you can see the price. I made a deal with Paul, I think he's gonna stand by it. And that is that at the drop of the ball, that we're gonna tell when it starts, instead of paying $60 or $70 for the ticket to get in, you can do it for $50. And if you do it online. So when are we gonna start that? Paul,
Right, tonight.
Tonight?
Yeah.
All right, 4 days. Is that long enough?
Yeah.
To get everybody? All right, so Tuesday it'll expire. That 4 days, that's a little more than 4. All right, so I'm gonna put an email blast that tells everybody that. So get online, quickly, get the deal, be there. It starts at 8 in the morning with breakfast, as you can see. The new email addresses that I've just gotten. So Claudio, you'll be on the new email, and you'll get the notice of everything, and then you'll be permanently on, but so will everybody else. So you'll know when to jump on that newcaliforniastate.com and sign in, buy the ticket at the discounted price. And now, if you can come early, well before 8, like 7, we'll put you to work. Because we can use the help.
I wanted to also, I don't know if did you mention this before? This is Epoch Times, and Epoch Times is a Chinese organization. The president reads this every day. And this was our first coming out in page 3. The president read this. And since then, Epoch Times loves what we're doing. And that's always nice when you have a paper that has about a 20 million per day circulation around the world. So we're getting a lot of recognition. They're doing specials on about the fact we're doing the Zhilijiang yellow vesting thing. This paper is old school newspaper. It is the most welcome relief to sore eyes I've seen in 25 years of reading newspapers.
Yeah.
They give you the story and that's it, and you decide.
Yeah.
That's the way they do business.
No
It's
commentary.
Yeah, and Paul here has been very instrumental in doing this. Paul, you want to say a few words here very quickly because we're being
Oh, yeah.
forced
sure.
out of here.
Well, just about that.
Well, we haven't even had our soft drinks and cookies yet. What's important?
I met the people from Epoch Times when I was out candidating for U.S. Senator. They stuck with me because they found out that my purpose and my standards, my Christian standards, align with their standards, their traditional family values, all that. They are owned by a group of engineers, software engineers. And they've developed technologies, and they're fabulous. In fact, they've got new technologies out. They've got a replacement, unhackable email system, a replacement for Facebook. They've got a replacement for the voting system. You can't hack it. They're all talking to the president about this. As I was driving up today, one of the people that had been to the conventions with us, Nan Su, one of the Chinese, he travels with me a lot. And I tell you, these guys really pay attention. There's no messing around. When they come and follow us and they're recording us, that's work. They're doing it. I talked to him today, told him what I'm doing. I keep him appraised of what's going on in California. Then he tells New California State, and then he comes back to me and says what Epoch Times is doing for us. Epoch Times is getting ready to hire 2 or 3 more reporters specifically to follow New California State Development.
Wow.
That's brand new news. This newspaper does wind up on Donald Trump's desk every day. It's the only one that is endorsed by him because there's no fake news in this. And I know for a fact that when I talk with these guys about anything that goes in this paper, they say to me, "Where'd you get your information, Paul? Verify it." Nothing goes in this. There's nothing that they do that is going to slant you anyway. They're going to give it to you just straight out. The other person that sees this every day is the president of China. Because see, these people, they own that musical thing called Shenyun.
Oh,
You've seen
the
that?
ballet.
Has anybody gone to it? Go to it. Go to it. It's great. I've been there twice. They sell out They've got 5 of those things running simultaneously around the world. They sell out 100% of every show that they do. And every year it's a brand new show. And what they're doing there is, and the reason why they love what we're doing and they love us folks, because they become part of our family. In fact, they've adopted me. Really, they adopted me. And what they are doing this show for is because a lot of these people, the performers in there, have family. They're all part of the Falun Gong people. They're the most peaceful, the healthiest Chinese in China. But they're a threat to the communists. So the communists have demonized them. Kind of like what's happening with Republicans here, right? We're being demonized.
Christians.
In fact, we're demonized to them when they come over here and become a U.S. citizen because they reference a Republican to be part of the Republic of China, the Republic of Korea, North Korea, about the Soviet Socialist Republic, you know. That's Republican. They think, oh, these guys are communists. So we've been doing that. But a lot of these people that perform have family members that have been taken off the street, incarcerated in prisons. They've checked their blood. They check their blood to find out what the blood type is and make sure they're healthy so they can market their body parts.
Wow.
God.
A liver's $175,000. They sell like crazy. And many of those people that perform, just to honor those people to go to this thing, because they're doing this because their family members are dying and the world has got blind. It's no different than my dad's family losing 30 of his family in Auschwitz burned to death in the ovens. The world turned its eyes on it, right? Same thing with this. So that's what the show's about. So they are staying with us 100%. Donald Trump loves them. In fact, when I called Dan Su today, had to tell him that yesterday when I was listening to Hannity was saying, oh, I just read today in Epoch Times. I guarantee you the Democrats they hate this group. They will do anything. In fact, the communist Chinese are totally against them. They also know about me because every time I go on here, they cover me, and I cover stuff like about the Falun Gong people. I cover stuff about Vietnam, the Vietnamese, because I'm involved with the Vietnamese, and they're all, you know, it's the Soviets. I mean the Chinese. They call them the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, based in Beijing, California. San Francisco. So it's like. It's cheap to get, and if you want good news, and if you got somebody you just can't break them away from their stupid, doubt or whatever, buy them a subscription and have it sent to their house and let them start reading it. The truth will set you free, and
Amen.
You will be free indeed. Isn't that right? Mm-hmm. Then one other thing is that I'm creating another group that's going to be partnered with New California States called the Melting Pot Patriots, because while I was out campaigning, I ran my campaign completely different than anybody else. In fact, I got a lot of ridicule because they say, you've got to do it this way. I didn't have a campaign manager. Being I'm a Christian, my campaign manager was the Holy Spirit. I came in second place. I only spent $15,000 on my total campaign. That's history right there. Nobody's ever done that and come that far as a U.S. Senator. So what I realized was that a lot of people, when they start doing the polls, they say, well, in the polls, because I wasn't in the poll, because I was stealth. I was working, my own deal. The people they call up in the polls are the white folks, the white voters. They don't care about the Hispanics or any of these immigrants that they're trying to use, So the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Cambodians, the Hmongs, the Filipinos, the Coptic Christians, the Christian Arabs who are being beheaded right now, are in this state right now, and I have estimated there's about 5 million of them who are legal citizens who have the same family values that we all have. The thing is, they don't know who to vote for, and like you said something about being invited, right? Nobody's invited them to the party. We're inviting them to our party. It's called Melting Pot Patriots, and we're going to teach them because we are a educational nonprofit organization. This is going to be the educational side. We are going to be educating these people about what Republicanism is and how it matches up to what they are, because you know they're against same-sex marriage, they're against abortion, they want good schools, they want safety, they want everything that everybody in this room wants. But they're not being heard, and they're not even voting. It's 5 million now. When you think about that, since Donald Trump is listening and paying attention to us, wouldn't it be a good thing for us to support this effort? Because you know what? We could wind up bringing 5 million votes in California alone to the president in 2020. In 2016, he only got 67 million votes. So 5 million votes, I mean, that's huge. But there's only one state, because we're going to go beyond the states. So all the other states that are talking right now with the, doing the separation and all that stuff, we're going to try to input that into their deal too, so they can get those people. And get those people because they're patriots. And you know, we need them. And they're all Asians. In the primary, one good example is that in the primary, out of the Asiatic Indians, the whole country of India, there are roughly 1 million who can vote here in California, they're citizens. In the primary, less than 15,000 voted.
Wow.
I want that 985,000 votes. We're gonna go after those people. And you know what? I'm working on it, and they're so receptive. They're just saying, when are we gonna do this? When are we gonna do this? Well, we are doing it right now. In fact, this month, I just did my first presentation, and we are helping a gal who is part of New California. Her name is Ellen Zhao. She is the Donald Trump of San Francisco. She's running for mayor. She's Chinese, Christian Chinese gal.
She might make it.
Yeah, she can make it. You know why? We get melting pot patriots going there. We get the Chinese there. We go after the Russians. We go after all the Asians in San Francisco, and we start teaching about this stuff. And then they say, well, nobody taught us this stuff before. We didn't know. That's why we didn't vote. Where do we vote? So Republican, we're going to sign them up. And then we're going to sign them up and get them hooked up to New California. And I don't care if they live in San Francisco, because people in San Francisco can promote what we're doing. I live in Alameda County, so I'm not even in New California. But there's things happening. And you know something, I want to tell you, in a spiritual sense, because I'm a Christian, and I'm not ashamed to stand up and say this to anybody. God is watching America.
Amen.
America exists today because God planned it that way.
That's right.
Before He created the whole universe. Donald Trump's in office because God wants to save America.
That's right.
And he's working from Donald Trump, which, when Donald Trump was asked to run, he says, I'll do it because I think I can do something. But you got to promise me this. You're going to protect me and my family. That's all I want. You just make sure that we don't, God didn't put him in office to be a sacrifice or a martyr. He's going to finish. And we want to help him with 2020, get those, get another 10 million votes to him that the Democrats don't even know exist. Well, they know exist, but they don't care. They've flushed those people. We're going to say, come on, okay, join with us. And those people are the ones that, the Sikhs, oh man. The Sikh community, they're huge, and they love us.
They're pro-American. They're all pro-American.
They're out there. And a lot of you probably saw the one Sikh man that was beat up, and they spray painted his car and all that stuff. Surjit is a friend of mine. Lives in Turlock. He's right on. He's going to be promoting his people. What do they have? They've got businesses, they've got money, they're patriots. They are contributory to America, and that's what we've lost, is people that are contributing to America. Right? Really, it's my hands out. That's what I'm doing. What are you going to give me today? And they're saying, no, we want to earn it. We want to make this happen. We come from a country where you can't have this. You can't vote. The Chinese can't vote. They think they're free, but they're not, because they don't have freedom. So, anyway, thanks for your time. And
all right. Thanks. All right, we got cookies. We got water.
I don't want to take any cookies home, but I do want your name badges.
Starting tonight, if you go on newcaliforniastate.com, any of you will pay the same prices, the lowest, $50. Please come. We could use the help. If you come early, breakfast is served at 8. We'll start setting up at probably 7, so that breakfast comes on at 8. And so for the first hour, we're going to be setting up the rooms, putting the decorations up, taking the sound system. So please, everybody, cookies, water, soft drinks.
And before we vanish, just real quick,
Here we go.
we have a town hall meeting coming up March 2nd. It looks like the day we're gonna have 5 counties. We're gonna need a lot of volunteers, a lot of help. The 5 counties would be Placer, El Dorado, Nevada, Amador, and Sacramento, correct?
When is that?
Plaster, you got plaster? Yeah.
Placer, yeah. March 2nd. So,
And what county is it actually gonna be in?
we'll be hosting it in El Dorado.
Oh, okay, great.
Cool, finally. Keep your eyes out for that. And tell your friends, neighbors, let's make it a big one.
Thanks, Mark. I said thanks. Okay, guys, it's over, but I'm gonna tell you guys again about the convention. That will be the New California State Third Constitutional Convention, and that's gonna be January 26th, 2019. There's Jackie at 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And, okay, let me first, guys, gotta tell you something. I have to take off my glasses now because my eyesight is getting better. Lord, thank you for that. But anyway, January 26th, 8 to 4 at Roseville Veterans Memorial Hall. It's at 110 Park Drive. That's 110 Park Drive in Roseville, 95678. And hopefully you guys can hear me. Everybody else is talking, but it is that you can register online, newcaliforniastate.com, and it costs $50. Okay, so hope to see you guys there. I will be sworn in that day, so I'm looking forward to it. It's our only hope for California. Again, it's going to be January 26th, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Roseville Veteran Memorial Hall, 110 Park Drive in Roseville. And also, there is a phone number here for reservations. You can call 916-773-7171. So hopefully, or get a hold of me and I'll see what we can do, okay? I will post the link on there, Johnny. Thank you. The link is www.newcalifornia-events-1/new-california-state-3rd, that's 3RD, constitutional convention. Okay, so I will post all this. As a matter of fact, I probably will do this right now. Oh wait, a lot of good that did. Hold on here. Let me see this. There it is, guys. There's at least that right there. Can you guys see it? There we go. And Johnny, you could get a hold of me. You have my number as well. So hopefully I'll see you there, Johnny. Paul Preston is the president of the New California, and as you can tell, very, very knowledgeable. And so here it is. Alvina, guess what you guys are getting out there? New Nevada. New Nevada will be around. I believe they read their first readings on Tuesday, but the 21st is when it's going to take off. So God is moving everywhere. We no longer should allow this for us to be taken in by the left, and we have no choice here. So anyway, Alvina, look at this. This is going to be New California here, but New Nevada, and hopefully I'll be out there helping the New Nevada as well, because we need to do this. So, okay, folks. Here I am. I know nobody's used to see me with that glasses. Neither have I since I was in the 5th grade. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful evening. We will see you, newcaliforniastate.com. It's our only hope for California. So I will see you guys soon. You guys have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.